All right, should we get the show on the road?
Yeah.
The struggle is real.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. This is our video series called The Struggle is Real.
Because the struggle to talk about mental health and be mentally healthy is real.
So you're back again for another week.
Perfect.
That must mean we're doing something right.
And if you've stumbled in here for the very first time, welcome.
Welcome. All are welcome. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to be bringing you all the feels.
All the emotional feels.
But we're not going to just be watching the feels and somebody else going through the feels. You have to feel the feels.
We want you to have some feels and we want to feel them with you.
All right, so emotions. Feels are emotions. Like, feels are like the new hip waves talking about emotions.
That's what the kids are saying these days.
Oh, the kids are calm. You had to Google it, but we now know what that is. All right, first things first, emotions. Society and our culture tell us that having emotions isn't really that good of a thing. They should be controlled, they should be silenced, they should be avoided, especially if they're negative. Whew,
Yeah.
like Kaylee, have you ever had an emotion?
Never had an emotion. What's an emotion?
Me either, me
That's
either.
not
We are
compute.
robots. We are robots. See, this is society. We're just going through society's lens. But, newsflash, I know you're not gonna believe it, but our emotions are so normal, and you might not know it, but every person you see is experiencing them.
At every given moment, everyone is having an emotion.
They're so normal.
So normal.
So
And not
normal.
just normal, straight up good, straight up beneficial, bringing you a daily dose of awesome every day.
Exactly. Our lives would be so pointless and so boring if we didn't have any emotions. Emotions weren't just like made up by rom-coms. And so something that we can just avoid and pretend that we don't have and only exist in like people who are just silly. Emotions are actually way older than you, me, and everybody who's alive right now. So Kayla's going to tell us about where these emotions came from.
Absolutely. So there's this crazy thing called evolution. Whoa. Whether you believe in evolution or not, it happened. It's a real thing that's out there. And evolution is where our emotions come from. The same reason that our bodies are structured the way they are, because it was the most beneficial for us to stand up straight. We have emotions because it was the most beneficial for us to have all the feels.
And each emotion can be traced back to a really specific purpose. So
Yes.
something like fear and anxiety, that allows you to escape danger. Things like happiness and love, that allows you to make connections and form groups. And something like anger made you be able to assert dominance and fight for your survival and
Yeah.
basically get the things that you needed to get. So emotions are good. We need emotions to survive. But now we live in a society where there aren't like saber-toothed tigers and these really clear-cut situations.
At least not in Canada. Like
Well,
maybe some of you watchers out there are
Like-
living in places where those exist. But
maybe
we don't have
or
those.
like Bigfoot.
Yeah.
He exists. But now life is a little bit messy and it's not really clear how emotions are supposed to work. And so even though they're really normal, they might feel very kind of scary to deal with.
So we've come to the consensus that emotions are amazing and they're great and they bring us so many good things, but that doesn't always mean that we need to express every emotion we have at every moment. There are some situations in which certain emotions are not super appropriate. So we have to learn to control our emotions in some of the situations that we're in. So for example, if you're at work one day and your boss is being a real big jerk face and being a little bit snarky to you and you feel the anger boiling up into your body and you've become a ball of rage, it might not be the best time to just like spew your rage at him in the form of like throwing your boiling coffee in his face.
Yeah, you might want to keep your job.
You might have bigger goals like keeping your job and paying your rent.
And I hear hot coffee to the face is like not on like top 10 things to do to impress your boss.
No, crazy. Yeah.
So in that situation, you know, even though it's totally normal to maybe feel rage and anger, you might not necessarily want to do that specific thing. So what we have to do is we have to learn how to regulate our emotions.
Yes.
Yes. Praise.
Preach it. So one of the best ways to regulate our emotions is to try and break our emotions down into smaller pieces. Because if we just think of our whole emotional experience as this one big thing, it's so threatening. It's like this big ball of stuff and we don't know how to like go near it. And for the most part, we try and like stuff that in the back corner of our mind anyway. So we're not even really good at like kind of piecing together what it is. So the best way to start to get in touch with our emotions and manage them better is to break those emotions down to smaller pieces. It makes everything easier. So
Especially for your first timers out there.
exactly. So when we break our emotions down into components, there's 3 main things you need to be aware of. The first one is your thoughts, the things that voices all the stuff going on in your brain. The second thing you need to be aware of is the physical stuff going on in your body. So the physical, we call them physical cues, the things that are happening in your body. The third thing you need to be aware of is your behavior. So a lot of the times, even unbeknownst to ourselves, we have certain behaviors that give away our emotions, even if we don't want them to. So when you're really happy, if you're smiling, if you're sad, doing a little sad face, things like that. So we're gonna walk you through the 3 of those to make sure we're all on the same page about how those 3 works. So the first thing you need to tune into is what's going on in your brain. What are all the thoughts that are floating around? Are they just nice, happy, cool thoughts like, oh, the sky's nice and blue, life is so great, I got a cute little puppy, everything's great? Or is your thoughts like a giant swirling turbo of inferno rage of just like there's 10 different voices and they're shouting at you and they're having a fight in your head and like cups of coffee are getting thrown around. Like it's just like so intense in your mind right now you can barely even make out the thoughts that you're thinking. If that's the case, then you might need to take some time and kind of decompress what's going on in your mind right now.
The second thing is body cues. A lot is happening in your body when you're having an emotion. So let's take anxiety. Our heart might be racing, our palms might be sweating, we might feel quite tense, like we're about ready to like jump off and run away. If we're angry, we might feel really flushed. If we're happy, we want to just like smile and express it and feel really light. And so we can pay attention to all these different things going on in our body.
And the third component we want you to know about is behavior. And so, like we were saying, sometimes we don't even realize it, but we have certain behaviors that give away our emotions. And certain behaviors tend to just go with emotions really well. So when you're really happy, smiling. When you're really sad, like crying or having that like sad face. When you're angry, like furrowing your eyebrows, like looking really angry. What's really interesting about these emotional behaviors is that they are universal across the globe.
And this ties back to the thing that emotions are normal. Everybody has them. So let's just accept that.
Yes.
And so why do we care about these components? Because
we said so.
Yeah, don't ask any questions. Never ask why. Because at any given time and any given emotion, one of these might be really, really, really loud. And we can choose different ways to deal with those emotions based on which one's the loudest. Maybe we want to deal with our thoughts, or maybe we want to change our behavior. So understanding the components can then help you choose what you want to do with those.
Absolutely. So if you're at work and your boss is being a big jerk face and you're having those thoughts, but I'm going to throw this coffee in his face, maybe the biggest thing you need to do is just manage your behavior for a few minutes by not throwing a coffee in his face.
Don't pick up the coffee cup.
Don't go near it.
You might notice that our little table is gone and maybe the lighting's a little bit different because our camera died. So this is now being brought to you from Vanessa's iPhone.
You're welcome, Apple, for that little
Shout out.
shout out.
So where do we leave off?
So we want to tell you about a tool that we have that can be really helpful at tuning into where you're at with your emotions, and especially tuning into where you're at with those components that we were just talking about. And so this tool we like to use is called the emotional thermometer. So jog your memory back to like the olden days when we had like mercury thermometers with like the little ball on the bottom and the thing on top. I'll put a little picture of a thermometer right here. Got it? Perfect. So now you know what a thermometer is. Picture the numbers 0 to 10 running up the thermometer. So 0 at the very bottom and 10 at the very top. And all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the middle. And what we want you to try and do is map on that thermometer where you're at from 0 to 10. So if you're feeling a little bit angry, are you just like a 2 out of 10? Like someone like bumped you on the way to work and you're just like a little bit frustrated. Or maybe something really significant happened and you're at like a 9 out of 10. And the important thing to know is that as you get higher up that thermometer, you get closer to the possibility of like yourself bursting out the top of that thermometer. Picture like cartoon characters where they like slowly fill with red until like steam comes pouring out of their heads. That's what we're trying to avoid. So we don't want to get to a 10. That's like you lose the game.
Yeah, because that's an awful feeling to feel that intense of an emotion.
Absolutely. And a really great reason to check in with your emotions as often as you can is that sometimes our emotions are really sneaky and they can be like boiling under the surface without us really realizing it. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're just like exploding with emotion and it just feels really out of control and really hard to manage. Whereas if you can check in with yourself as often as you can, as often as you think about it, then it can be much easier to kind of catch those emotions before they get too big to manage.
Because you just might not even notice when you're at a 2 and a 4 and a 6. And so if you're constantly checking in, then you become like hyper aware of exactly where you're falling on that.
Yes.
And so then you know if you're like, hey, I gotta do something about this, I'm too high.
Absolutely. And you can also check in with where your components are at. So maybe you're, walking down the street and you just realize that like your thoughts are racing out of control and you notice that your heart's beating really quickly and you notice that you're showing it in your behavior, you're like acting really anxious or angry or whatever your emotion is. You can now try and use some strategies to manage those 3 things.
All right, so we have a challenge for you this week, obviously.
Challenge.
What we want you to do is we want you to start checking in with your emotions. Figure out your emotional experience.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. Start paying attention. So start paying attention to your components and how you respond to your emotions. Are you freaking out every time you have a negative emotion?
The way we want you to do that is to use this emotional thermometer that we've been talking about. So what we want you to do is like as you're walking down the street, just be like, hey, I thought that's a super cool video with Vanessa and Kaylee talking about emotional thermometers. Where am I at on my thermometer? And check in with yourself. Are you at a 2? Are you at a 4? Are you at an 8? And check in on the different emotions you're experiencing as well. What am I on anger? Where am I at on sadness? Where am I at on anxiety? And figure out what your emotion components are doing as well.
Because when we become aware of our emotions, then we're not just like straight up reacting to them. It gives us some space to choose how to respond.
Because a really important thing we want everyone to take away from this video is that we should always be in control of our emotions instead of letting our emotions control us. So our second challenge for you, because we're so full of surprises, we got all these challenges for you today, is we want you to go out there in the world and talk about your emotions as well. And we have a specific way we want you to do that. Don't just go walking around being like, did you know that 5 years ago I was sad? I was. Because that might make people feel a little uncomfortable. What we want you to do is check in with yourself on that thermometer and choose a number that you think might be the edge of like the threshold of when your emotions might start to feel a little bit out of control, or when you start to feel that that number might be where your emotions start to kind of control you a little bit more. And we want you to pick that number and be aware of when you start to get to the edge of that number. And if you think that you're reaching that number, let's just say for me it might be like a 6. So when my emotions start to get to like 5, 5 and a half, 5 3/4, I know I need to start having some conversations with people around me about where my emotions are at. So if I'm having a heated argument with Vanessa about something horrible that she may or may not have done, and I notice that my emotions are getting really heated, I might need to say to her like, this might not make sense right now, but I'm like at a 6 out of 10 of anger and I'm feeling a little heated, I just need a break. And later I might need to explain to her what 6 out of 10 means, because that might seem weird. But just check in with people that you're having a conversation with when your emotions start to get too high.
So we've made you pretty aware of your emotions, and you're gonna learn a lot about your emotions this week. But you might be like, hey, I know all these emotions now, what the heck do I do with them?
Yes.
But stay tuned, because we're gonna talk about what do we do with our emotions when we don't necessarily want to express them everywhere.
Exactly. Next week we're gonna have a super sweet cameo stepping in.
Queen celebrity.
Who's going to talk to us all about the different ways that we can regulate our emotions depending on how we're experiencing them.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out with us again.
Yes, we know the struggle to talk about mental health and be mentally healthy is real, but hopefully after today it's a little bit easier. Done.
Done. I do not wish to say anymore.
The struggle is real.
I wish Grace Vanderhall could be our. She's the.
Oh my god. Maybe if we'll get big enough, she'll be on our show.
Maybe we should just email her and see. I would love that. Grace, if you're watching,
We love you.
we love you and we want you to do
But in
music.
a not creepy way, in a really respectful, we admire you kind of way.
Yeah, yeah.